Climbing Gold is a production of Duct Tape and Beer, with support from the North Face, Never Stop Exploring, Koros, Performance Sports Technology, and Element, restoring health through hydration.
Hey everyone. So the Paris Games, they've come to a close. Alex caught the red eye home, and we were able to sit down as a team and discuss what we'd seen, which, frankly, was pretty freaking awesome. Both for us watching back at home and for Alex on the ground in Paris. The youth took center stage in the men's combined boulder and lead. It was an incredible battle, a sort of changing of the guards like we predicted. If there was anyone who doubted Janja Garnbret's place as the greatest competitor climbing has ever seen, those last, 2 or 3 doubters have clearly been silenced. It was an incredible comp where Brooke Rabatow took silver in an emotional final. Sam Watson kept pushing the speed climbing world record lower and lower, but it was Indonesian speed climbing legend Vedrik Leonardo who shone the brightest in men's speed, winning his nation's 9th gold medal in history. And Alexander Miroslav, who has dominated women's speed climbing, held off a young field and capped an incredible career with both a gold and a new women's world record. We sit down with Alex to debrief. Producers John Bergman and Lisi Hendricks join in. I'm Fitz Cahall. This is Climbing Gold.
Welcome back, Alex. Welcome back.
Do you have a USA Climbing pillow?
I do, yeah.
Dude, USA Climbing makes pillows?
Well, they did a long time ago. I don't know if they do now.
I wonder. I've always actually wondered about that behind your, like that, John. I was like,
yeah.
Why did they choose a pillow? Like, it's a funny bit of swag to make.
Yeah.
I'm kind of into it, the throw pillow.
Yeah, I don't know.
Nobody makes swag throw pillows.
When did you get invited to do the baton ceremonial opening? I was surprised. Like, I saw you walking out on the live stream. Oh, holy smokes, that's Alex. He's doing the ceremony.
Yeah, I think like my team had gotten an email about that the week before, but you're like, what is this? And it doesn't make any sense and whatever. And then that morning, the event organizer guy who had been WhatsApping with basically the French guy who was in charge of the venue, he's kind of like in charge of making sure everything works like on site. He just called me on WhatsApp and was like, can you be here in 20 minutes? And I was like, oh, geez. But I was staying nearby, so I just like hustled over and they briefed me on how to use the baton, which basically just means you walk out there, you go thump, 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 and you walk back. Yeah. It was pretty funny.
So the venue, 6,500 people, what was it like to see our sport in a setting like that, with that noise, with that enthusiasm, with all of it?
It was incredible. I mean, it was like nothing I've ever seen in climbing. The number of flags for every country. I mean, obviously there were a ton of French people with like French flags painted on their faces and carrying big flags and all that kind of stuff. But then, particularly in speed climbing, when certain competitors would come out, all of a sudden you'd see, 100 Polish flags come out, or like 100 Indonesian flags, which are actually the same flag if you flip it upside down. But it was just amazing to see the representation, just so many people who were so psyched. And there were the giant sort of posters of people's faces, where it's like Oriane's face, but 3 meters high. It's like these giant cardboard cutouts, and you're like, oh my goodness. It felt like going to a full-on mainstream sports game.
One thing that struck me was like watching the speed was how quiet, how like it would go from just like on TV, it felt like a pin drop, to just absolutely batshit crazy. Was that the same way in person? Like when Alexander Miroslav's like stepping up for the final heat, like what was that like to hear it get so quiet?
Yeah, in person, we actually commented on that too. I was talking to the person next to me about that, where it was like, oh, it feels like we're at a golf tournament. All of a sudden it's like completely silent, and then they go, and then everyone explodes, and it's like insane, and then it's quiet again. It was it was interesting. And I suppose that the live announcers must have said that. I never quite heard them. I don't know. It was just sort of like an unspoken, you're like, oh, this is what you do at a speed comp.
Yeah.
It definitely added to the tension because they're like, ready, beep, beep, beep. And then, 5 seconds later, you see who won and you're just like, whoa, the whole audience is just like on the edge of their seat waiting.
Did it feel like it was a knowledgeable climbing crowd? Like, for example, I was watching the tennis, and in between, like in tennis, you get 2 serves, and if you fault the first one, you get, you take your second serve, and it's really customary to be like totally quiet throughout that process if somebody gets a second serve. And yet people were shouting and hooting and hollering in between the serves, and the commentators were saying like, oh, this is not a normal tennis crowd. Like, they obviously don't know the like normal whatever respect that you're supposed to show the athletes in keeping quiet. And so I was wondering if the climbing audience knew climbing, because sometimes it seemed like they did, but other times, like I know during the slab boulders, they would start clapping like in rhythm, in unison. And I was thinking like, man, that would drive me crazy if I was a competitor trying to concentrate on these little footholds and the crowd starts like giving me this rhythmic like beat.
I think that the climbing audience was probably overall more savvy than most other audiences, just because the climbing venue was quite a ways out of town. And so you kind of had to go there really intentionally. And actually, I met some of my, like some family friends in Paris who like live in Paris. And they said they'd bought random tickets, but they were buying tickets like in 3-packs where you could choose one event, but then you would just go to other events randomly. Like they would just kind of give you tickets to things. And so I think that a lot of the people showing up at other sporting events were just kind of there to see the Olympics, and they're like seeing bundles of tickets, and they just show up at events and they're like, what's this? You know, like, what do you do in judo? Like, never heard of that, you know? Whereas I think the climbing was, I got the impression it was much more intentional because you had to like travel, 20 minutes on the metro to get out to the venue. So I don't know. I mean, I think some of the stuff with like the clapping and the crazy cheering and some of that is just because the in-house announcers, the people announcing the comp, are just constantly trying to keep the crowd fired up. And so, you know, depending who's climbing on which boulder, they're just constantly like, let's keep the energy high, let's keep going. And, you know, they're not really paying too much attention, I don't think, to the particulars of like who's doing which moves. It felt like a climbing crowd, but a little bit more diluted, like a little more mainstream, just because there's so many like French folks and their families and whatever. Just like, it felt like the most inclusive climbing thing you'll ever see, you know, like full cross section of like anybody showing up. And yet still a lot of climbers, you know, I still like signed a lot of shoes and harnesses and stuff like that. Like people brought climbing stuff.
JB, you teed up this question while we were, trading texts while we were watching this week. Curious, would you rather break the world record or win gold? And JB did this before it actually came into play. Yeah. Well, which would you rather have?
I would rather win gold because you can break the world record anytime. You can break the world record at the next World Cup. You know, it's like you can break it in training. It's like, yeah, winning in gold is only an opportunity every 4 years. That said, I actually think the way the men's speed played out was kind of ideal. I've got a whole little anecdote for you with speed climbing if you want, but in some ways it's almost worthy of like a whole different episode because it's like quite moving. But so, Vedrik. So apparently Indonesia, he won, I think, either the 9th or 10th gold medal ever for the country of Indonesia, and the first one outside of badminton and shooting or something. But basically it's like a big deal for an Indonesian to win a gold medal. But apparently the Indonesian Federation pays out $350,000 or something like that for winning a gold because it's such a big deal. So it's like basically his entire life and his family's entire lives are like completely transformed by him winning a gold medal. And I just couldn't help, because I was a little sad for Sam Watson because I was like, oh, he did post the fastest time. It's too bad he didn't win. But on the other hand, the difference between him winning a bronze medal and a gold medal, it's really not going to change his life. It's like realistically, it's not going to change his earning potential. Like he's going to support himself just fine. He's fine. He'll have plenty of other opportunities to win things. But for Vedrik, I was like, oh my God, like he just transformed his entire life, his family's whole life. Like that is a big deal for his country. Also, you should have seen how psyched the Indonesians were. Like, because there were so many people like wearing headdresses and like, I don't know, like indigenous garb and like all kinds of stuff. Like basically when Team Indonesia comes out to cheer, you're like, whoa, Team Indonesia is here. Like lots of flags, like a lot of passion. Anyway, so after that, I was like, oh, I'm kind of glad he won, honestly, because it's so much more transformative for him.
Yeah. That really speaks to the point that we made in the speed climbing episodes too about how...
Yeah, about opportunity.
Yeah, and it's a democratic sport, like in that sense where it can kind of really spread into places where, a state-of-the-art gym can't. Yeah.
I thought the speed round was really cool because so many people PR'd, like even people that didn't win their round set personal bests. And you're like, like if you're at the Olympics doing the best that you've ever done, you can't really ask for better than that. So it was like, oh, we got to see some high level competition where you're like, I don't know. It's like everybody came to play and they played really well. You're like, okay, well, that's all you can ask for.
Yeah. I thought like it was cool to go to other places like outside of the climbing community and talk to people that were watching the Olympics because most of them watched the speed climbing over the like lead in bouldering, and I heard a lot of commentary from people just being like very impressed with speed climbing as a sport and saying things like, you couldn't even crawl across the floor that fast, you know?
It's actually probably true. It probably would be harder
Yeah,
to crawl.
which is true.
It's like, I don't know if I could crawl 45 feet in 4 seconds. You're like, ah,
Yeah,
my
exactly.
knees.
Like, yeah, it'd be really hard.
There's like a sweet spot when you're like about 18 months old or something like that with like certain kids. Or like,
Yeah.
it's the only time that ever happens. Or you're like, how did that kid move so quick?
If you did move that fast on all fours, you'd look like a cat, like attacking, you know, like a lion pouncing.
Yeah. Well, and Sam Watson did end up on, you know, I mean, like it wasn't like a whole segment, but he did end up on the primetime broadcast. They showed that kind of race for gold right there, or race for bronze.
I mean, it is an American winning it's an American winning a medal.
And a world record.
And a world record. You're like, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what was fortunate about the speed also is just the way everything played out with the races being really close, really exciting. It's not always that way in speed climbing, as we kind of saw with Ramad Adimolyono, like he false started, and that was unfortunate. But sometimes at World Cups, like there's a lot of false starts. Like sometimes you just have, and sometimes like both competitors might false start, or sometimes you even have big finals or small finals where both competitors slip. Like there's just so much that can go wrong in a speed final because it's such a sport of like precision. I don't know if you'd call it like fortunate or lucky or whatever, but Lisi, to your point about the casual fan enjoying it also, it's like it could have gone way the other way where you just had like all sorts of false starts and slips and stumbles, and the casual fan would have been sitting there being like, this is terrible, this is so like boring.
That's like watching the final minute of a basketball game where you're like, why is everything a foul? And like, why is this taking 15 minutes? And you're kind of like, oh, it was a great game right up until a ground to a halt.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like if the speed comp was nothing but false starts, you'd be like, wait, why? Like, what is this sport? This is stupid. But no, you're totally right that it was well executed.
So not to toot our horns here, but when we did our Olympic preview, we basically, when we talked about the men's field, we were discussing that it really was this sort of moment where there's a changing of the guard and there is a battle between veteran stars and the emerging generation. I don't think that could have shaken out any more truer. Like, what was everyone's reaction to the men's combined?
Wow. There's so much. There's like so many points we could dive into. I guess just on a kind of broad level, I just really loved that it played out as kind of a perfect example of why the combined format is great with Toby winning, because Toby, young star, doesn't win quote unquote the bouldering round, doesn't win quote unquote the lead round, and yet when you put his two performances together in the discipline, he does end up being the gold medalist. And I think that kind of satisfies the burden of proof of, is combined unique enough from all the individual disciplines? It's like, yeah, absolutely. When you put them together, you're going to get something totally different. So I think Toby was a great example of that, his gold medal. Beyond that, I think it just was kind of what we expected, what we anticipated, which was that it was going to be this cutthroat battle between the young stars like Toby, like Serato Anraku, and the old guard of Adam Ondra and Yakob Schuber and all these other guys. It played out how we kind of envisioned it would in a really exciting way.
Yeah, I think that's my take too. I was like, it's exactly, I don't know, I felt like it was totally wide open going into it, and then it ended totally wide open. Like, I feel like if they did the comp again on a different day with different problems, I wouldn't be totally shocked to see the podium flip in different ways. You know what I mean? Because like, I interviewed Adam afterward, and he was like, well, at least I got a gold medal in lead climbing. It was pretty funny. But he was like, oh, I had the best performance on the lead walls. That's something. But like on that day, he just couldn't really do some of the boulders, and couldn't really interface with, like the coordination's too weird and it's just tricky. So he's like, well, I don't know. It shows a little bit how much the setting matters, kind of. I mean, it's hard to say, though, because the women's final, I felt like actually went the other direction, because with the women's final, when they came out, at first I was like, oh, these problems seem too easy and this like doesn't really seem like it's working. But then when it was all said and done at the end, the final scores, basically each position was separated by 10 or 12 points. And I was kind of like, the setting actually perfectly separated the entire field. It was like, that's actually a really good spread. It's really even, and it totally worked in the big picture. And so, yeah, I think my takeaway was like, you just can't judge the setting too much, because with the combined format, you really do have to combine them to see if it works.
Yeah, I think it's really tough. And I felt like semis, specifically on the men's side, did not do a good job as like a casual viewer, of separating the competitors. That was my personal opinion. I thought the problems were too hard.
Yeah, it was all too hard, yeah.
And the route was too hard as well.
Well, you kind of need the route to be too hard if the boulders are too hard.
Totally.
Because otherwise, then the lead climbers, then, the finals would be disproportionately all lead climbers.
Yeah, and that makes sense. The women's, I thought, was like slightly better in the semis, but still I thought maybe not. Like I thought maybe the route was slightly too easy, like through certain portions of it, like I just felt, I don't know. This is just my personal viewpoint as a like casual.
Yeah, I have to say I was like, I'm really glad my job is not a route setter right now. Like I think that's like to nail that, you're like, wow, they have to thread a needle in order to do that. You could totally ruin it by making it slightly too easy, and you could totally ruin it from a visual, like a presentation aspect by making it too hard. And I felt like they, especially in the finals, they threaded that needle in a pretty reasonable way.
I chatted with one of the men that was setting for the lead finals route. He was in the gym with me warming up to go try to climb the men's lead final route. I was like, good luck with that. He was like, well, I just have to go bolt to bolt. He was like, it's okay. But so we were like climbing in the little isolation room together, and we were chatting about it. And it was really interesting to hear the way the setters talk about the routes, because, obviously they need separation between the athletes, but then they need it to be tricky and sort of risky and like feel insecure the whole time. Like the competitors have to be sort of off balance and like stressed literally the entire time. And you saw that like a lot of the clips were like these crazy like crossbody, one-footed, like weird, like hard-looking positions. But then at the same time, they don't want people randomly slipping, because they basically they want people to be able to show their best. And so they don't want stopper moves. They don't want weird slips. They don't want anything like too... they don't want to compress. I don't know. And so when it was all said and done, I was like, everybody fell at different parts on basically all the routes. I mean, the men's semifinal route, the weird toe hook section through the pink stuff was probably the closest thing to sort of like a log jam like that. And then randomly I heard somebody say that apparently that pink part, that the night before they had toned it down quite a bit, because they were like, it's just, so they added a couple thumb catches and tried to like make it a little easier. And then everybody still fell there. And I was like, oh my God, how hard was that to begin with? But anyway, so someone is saying that the men's finals route could be like 9A plus or 9A at least. And you're like, that is so extreme for route climbing. It's like so hard. We'll be back with more after the break. Climbing Gold is brought to you by the North Face. I've been a North Face athlete for almost 18 years, and this summer you can join me and the North Face for a celebration of climbing, culture, and community at CLIM Fest. We're sending it big in the Big Apple at the Brooklyn Bridge Park on August 23rd and 24th. Watch her compete in an epic competition that sees athletes race to the top of a 55-foot wall over the water. On the ground, we've got DJ sets, food, exclusive merch, freestanding boulders to climb, and panel discussions led by my fellow North Face athletes and me. Whether you're happiest on the wall or the ground, don't miss the climbing event of the summer. Visit www.thenorthface.com and check out their event section for more info. Or check out our show notes for the link. Hope to see you there. I first found Koros when I was looking for a GPS watch that could track my biggest outdoor adventures. I needed something with a massive battery life that was also robust enough to handle the climbing. As it turns out, Koros is the only GPS watch brand that has done some serious development for climbers, from multi-pitch GPS tracking to indoor programmed workouts. The watches have a mind-blowing battery life. The Vertex watch series lasts for more than 100 hours in GPS activities, so I only need to charge it once every several weeks. I only need to charge my watch so sporadically that I can never find the charger, because I haven't used it in 6 weeks. If you're interested in bringing new technology into your climbing training and tracking, you should consider their new Vertex 2S. Go to Koros.com and use the code CLIMBINGGOLD to secure a free watch carabiner with the purchase of your new Vertex 2S. The link's in the show notes.
Let's talk Andra. I thought there were some great moments from Adam, like him topping the final boulder problem to stay in contention heading into lead, his acknowledgement of gratitude and also like disappointment where he like did the whole tear, kind of like tear thing when he didn't make the podium. I remember there was a time in our sport where there were a lot of people that would express frustration or criticism with Adam's displays of emotion, and they'd call them outbursts and sort of temper tantrums. And I think in a lot of ways, as time has gone by, I think Adam's strength is one of the coolest parts about him is just how much he actually shows how much he cares and how much emotion he actually presents, and what what a gift his whole career has been on that level of you actually got to see someone who visually showed what was going on inside their mind, like the highs and the lows. And then in this case, it was just awesome to watch Adam throughout this whole comp. And I was curious whether you guys saw that as well.
I mean, I interviewed him after the finals round, and he was definitely disappointed. I mean, he made no secret of the fact that he was like, "Oh, I'm disappointed in my performance, and I think I could have bouldered better." And he was kind of like, "Well, I'll keep lead climbing in the future." But he didn't say that he was retiring by any means. But he was kind of like, "I don't know if I care about competition bouldering because it's just not. It doesn't suit him that well." In a way, as it it's sort of diverging from what he likes to do, it seems. But I don't know. I mean, but the thing is, you can't really judge an interview with somebody 15 minutes after they failed to make the podium at the Olympics they've been training for 4 years either. Because you're kind of like, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot going on. But I mean, in general, I was just like, Adam Ondra is the best climber in the world. He climbed really well. He got the high point on the lead route. You're like, what a great performance. It's like, yeah, he didn't win. Like, who cares? Like, he still showed that he's the best climber in the world.
I was going to say, there is something kind of, I don't know what you'd say, incongruous with the timing, because you think of climbing now on more of a global stage than it's ever had, introduced to more casual fans than ever before, people that just want to be just kind of purely entertained by it. And here you have this guy that's so expressive, he's so vocal, he wears his emotions on his sleeve. It's like, oh, if he was 10 or 15 years younger, he would be perfect for where comp climbing is right now.
You mean he'd be Toby Roberts?
You could say that, right? Because the producers and videographers, all the people that are capturing this and filming it and put it out to the masses, they would always say, oh, we got to get his face, we got to get his emotions, because he's so expressive. And it's just, you're kind of like, oh, it's too bad though he's kind of on the tail end of his comp career, presumably, just as comp climbing is entering this ultra, I don't know, emotional, put it out on social media, put it out on network television, on the Olympics, all this stuff, because he's kind of the embodiment of what makes really exciting viewing right now.
Positive emotion. I was like, man, Hamish MacArthur, the random Team Great Britain guy that, I mean, I guess he's not a kid. I guess he's 20-ish. But
he probably doesn't think he's random either.
Yeah.
No, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, there are definitely a few dark horses in the Olympic finals where you're like, who's that?
But those people are like, my plan is working.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
Well, no, but I was going to say, so Hamish, interviewing him, he said he basically just expressed how much of a good time he had and how much he enjoyed the experience and how wonderful it was and blah, blah. And he was one of the few people I talked to who was genuinely positive about this was incredible. I was able to enjoy the being out there, and the crowd was insane and the climbing was fun. It's what a day. And I was kind of like, competition climbing needs a few more people like that who are just like, what a great day. It's like, because I don't know what his final standing was, but obviously he's not on the podium. But I definitely think he outperformed anybody's expectations. He climbed great. He had a good day. It's like he really represented for Team Great Britain.
Yeah.
And he had fun doing it. And I was like, oh, that's what I want to see in a competitor. Somebody who exceeds their own expectations and enjoys the process.
I was just curious, whether there were competitors that you saw that you're just like, damn, that person stood out for how strong they were, or just on certain elements. Because the TV is always different from in person. I mean, I think on TV, Sado just looked like a freaking buzzsaw. I mean, he kind of looked like how Yanya can look in the women's on TV.
Yeah, I think the two standouts were Sado and Yanya for sure. I mean, Yanya looked noticeably stronger on everything. She would climb the problems differently. She could overpower things. She just looked stronger. And then Sado definitely looked stronger too, but he was kind of nervous, and he definitely wasn't climbing his best. And I mean, as we saw from him getting a silver, because he's I don't know. It's I don't know if we're allowed to say stuff, but he's definitely a better climber. He's so good, but he just kind of fumbled and didn't look composed, and definitely the pressure got to him. I mean, he's so young and he's shy and he's quiet, and I think it was just a lot for him. It's funny. I interviewed him after, and I was like, "Oh, how'd it feel? Like, you got a silver. That's great. Because in a way, it's still pretty incredible that he can come out and not climb his best and still get a silver medal. It's like in a way that really shows like how good he is. That he doesn't have to have a great day. Because the other guys on the podium were basically peaking. They had great days. They climbed their best, and they made the podium. Serato like definitely did not have a good round, and came out with a silver. And so I was kind of like, they're like, that's pretty cool. And Serato was just like, no, I am very sad. It's like it's hard to interview him because his English is limited, but he was basically just like, no, I'm very disappointed. And I was like, oh, well, I think you could still be proud of yourself. You're still a great climber. And he's like, no. I was like, okay, it's so crazy.
Yeah, I felt like as a viewer, some of the like things that came across to me was that it felt like Serato had expectations around, like he was like, I'm the strongest person in this, like both fields, I'm going to win. And so then not winning was like disastrous. Whereas like Toby, I think didn't have any of those expectations and was like, I'm not going to win. I don't know what he thought or what anyone thought, obviously.
I'm sure he was trying to win, but yeah, there were no expectations.
It felt like there was like a heavy weight of expectations just as a viewer on Serato versus like Toby was like shocked when he got gold.
Totally.
And that was obvious as a viewer.
No, I think that's exactly how it played out. I mean, I think, and it was interesting seeing how all the different competitors responded to the pressure.
On TV, did anyone notice that with Toby winning the gold, that Alberto Hines Lopez had to be like, Toby, you've won. And that was exactly what happened to Alberto, where like Nathaniel Coleman in Tokyo had been like, Alberto, you've won. And Alberto like in Tokyo was like, no. And then like being like, what? And it was like the exact same thing played out, except Alberto was on the opposite side of it. Did anyone else catch that?
I didn't see that. That's the kind of stuff you see in broadcast, but you just can't see it live because it's like...
It was great. It was like, Toby was sort of so surprised. I was like, how could you not know? But I guess it must be hard to know exactly where the person needs to get to.
No, a lot of the competitors said they were intentionally not keeping track of points, trying not to listen to the things. They're all listening to headphones during isolation, so they're not really hearing the live announcement too much. And I mean, Yanya said the same thing, that she like didn't know where she needed to get. She didn't really know the rankings going. I mean, she knew she had a pretty good round in lead, but she was like, I need to come out and climb.
It's so cool in that sense because basically it produces moments where everyone is like to the death.
Yeah.
Like they're not like, oh, I need to get to that hole. They're like, I'm going to the freaking top. And that intensity is so rad, I feel like.
Yeah, so Yakob Schuber is an interesting example of this. So I talked to him after his semifinals performance, and in semis, he did know roughly where he needed to get to point-wise. Like he knew that he needed to get 30 points on the lead route in order to make it to finals. And so watching him, you could visually see that he was basically overpowering the whole bottom of the route. And I was like, oh, this is what it looks like when I go soloing or something. It's like when you're like really controlling it like a little too much and you're holding on too tightly and just like not really climbing well. But so he qualified, he did fine. And then I was talking to him afterward and he was kind of like, oh, it's very unusual that I climb like that, but I like really wanted to make finals. And he was like, so for finals, I'm obviously going to have to give it the 100% effort and just climb loose and, just like a muerte and just see what happens. Because he's like, obviously you can't overpower a finals route. It's like, it's just way too hard. And so then it was cool to see him come out on the finals route and just climb his absolute best, make it almost to the top of the route and then come out with a bronze medal. And you're kind of like, wow, what? Like, I mean, in a way, that's where you see him being a seasoned competitor.
Yeah.
He's like, he knew exactly what he needed to make it into finals. And then once he was in finals, he basically flipped the switch, climbed in a different style and performed. And I was like, what a boss. I really like Yakob Schuber.
You know what else I was thinking about Serato? I was thinking in terms of climbing heritage, like I was thinking what you used to have to do, what climbers would have to do in the past to kind of go from just being, I don't know what you'd call it, like the local hero, the local star of a certain area, certain crag or whatever, to being like, okay, they are now climbing royalty, right? And it was in the past, I think, just sending like really hard outside, right? Like if you climb whatever 514 or 515 something, then you've kind of like made it. And I was in watching these Olympics and particularly watching Serato and Toby too, but really Serato, I was thinking, the Olympics from now and going forward it's a whole new vehicle for climbers to kind of break into kind of the climbing mainstream consciousness, because everybody that's a diehard comp fan knew of Serato from last year because Fitz, you said he was a buzzsaw through this finals, and just like he was in these finals, he was doing that all last year on the World Cup circuit, and he ended the year ranked first in bouldering and first in ranking at the World Cup level. So it's kind of like, yeah, comp fans already knew about Serato, and they knew he was a generational talent, but I don't think a lot of the rest of the climbing world knew about it now. And now in watching the Olympics, I think everybody now, every climber is like, oh, Serato, this guy's incredible. And I think the comp fans are sitting there kind of like, yeah, like this is the guy that we were kind of telling you about last year, right? We were telling you like, watch this kid because he's coming. So it's just neat that the Olympics is a new way for climbers to kind of be presented to the masses without maybe necessarily having to crush 5:15 something.
Or without having to do anything dangerous. Like, oh, that's such a civilized way to arrive.
Speaking of climbing royalty, Yanya, do you think we can say it now? Is she officially competitive climbing's first GOAT? Because I think anyone who ever comes after this moment in time that strings together a few seasons of excellence will forever be compared to Yanya. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, I think I kind of hate the term GOAT, and it's like I don't really like this pro live stuff. But yeah, Yanya is by far the best competition climber of all time. So I mean, it's funny because like on the big screen they'd splash up people's stats every once in a while, and Yanya's had something like 70 or 80 competitions, and she's won like 50 or 60 of them and podium the rest. You know, basically, you're like, that is so next level. It's like crazy because most of the other women who were in finals had like, 30 World Cup appearances with 4 podiums and 1 win or something like that. And you're kind of like, oh yeah, okay. It seems like everybody else is kind of like in the mix, and then Yanya just wins everything she does. You're like, okay, well, that's a totally different level.
I thought that there was like, it wasn't just in climbing this time around in the Olympics, but there was like a lot of women that held that spot in the Olympics in general this year that Yanya holds in climbing. And I thought that was just really cool.
Yeah, Katie
Ledecky, Simone Biles, women that have been competing for a really long time at a very high level in their sport, just over and over again.
Yeah, it's true. When you make that point, it's like, that's completely true. And you see some of the track and field too. Like it was really neat to see that on a broader level.
It seems like such a masterstroke too, how Yanya played everything in the lead up to the Olympics and then winning the gold medal. Because remember, we were just talking just a couple weeks ago. We were saying, yeah, we wanted to interview her, but she's not really doing any interviews. And so she was keeping quiet to the press. And then I think like as the Olympics were going on, her sponsor Adidas dropped that there's like a 3-part documentary series about her. And you're just thinking it could all go bad if she doesn't win the gold medal, or if she has like a fluke slip and she ends up in 20th or something. And you're just kind of like, oh, shoot.
So I have a different appreciation of that now. So one of my friends is doing a feature film project with Yanya and has been like filming with her a bunch for like a long-term like feature doc sort of thing. And it was interesting talking to him because he basically said that she does no press for anything. She literally trains like 8 hours a day. She's just in her little dungeon training all the time. And that's all she wants to do is train and compete and win. And he said that there's like stress with her agent because she only gets like a half a day a month to do like work stuff, like photo shoots and like sponsor stuff and whatever else. And I was like, a half a day a month is like literally nothing. It's like insane. And I was like, dude, if you're training, like, he was like, oh, she's in the gym, maybe not necessarily like doing heavy lifting, but like, in the gym for like 8 hours a day every day. I was like, that is so next level. I mean, that's also why she has such next level dominance, but I'm kind of like, I actually don't think that it's part of any intentional strategy to like not do media. I think she just doesn't do anything. I think she just doesn't do photos and video and press, and she's just like, whatever, she just trains.
Doesn't that make it just almost more impressive then that she is such a star, because she's doing it without the kind of the machine behind her, right? The press and the promotion.
Well, that's the thing is, I think she's a star strictly on the strength of her own merit. It's like she's just won so many things. Everyone's like, Yanya, it's like, yeah, no, there's literally no like press machine behind her. I mean, she's not doing anything, but people just love her because she dominates, which really is the best way to be known. It's like, it's way better to be well known for the things that you accomplish rather than the things that media puts out about you.
Lisi, you and I were texting on during the women's comp finals, and you made the point that this was the first time we actually saw Yanya nervous and rattled. And Alex, I don't know if you saw that, but it was like basically.
Well, so in person, actually, you could see her like visibly stressed about her finger on problem 4.
Yeah.
And then talking to her afterwards, she said she got it stuck in one of the holds. And so she like jammed her finger weird, and it's a finger she'd broken before or something. And so she was like, oh God, I hurt my finger. And then she was like, I don't care if I lost my hand, I'm sending. And then, like kept going or whatever.
Yeah.
But actually, so even like from across the venue in person, you could see her like visibly stressed and like playing with her finger a little bit in between attempts on problem 4.
Yeah.
But then I never saw the video close-up stuff afterward of like her actually.
Yeah, because they had like in isolation, they had a camera back there, and it was a short clip, but you could see her like really like pretty like, oh wow. And it was almost like, is she gonna come out? I mean, I think we all thought she was, but it was kind of like, who's gonna emerge for the lead finals? And I think we always think of Yanya as just being stronger than everyone else because we've never seen her come from a place of weakness before, or like come from that sort of like, oh, is it she just kind of wins all the time. And it made me, I don't know, from my standpoint, I don't know if you feel this way too, Lisi, like it made me realize like maybe part of her greatest strength is actually her mental side versus we always just think of her just as stronger than everyone else. And maybe it's like she actually maybe is mentally just gifted for this sport.
To me, it seems like, her confidence is a huge part of why she is so successful. And like she's proven to herself that she can do it so many times that she just knows she can. And so it was interesting to see that shaken a bit, like as a viewer. And to even before the isolation shots, you could see frustration and like, which she rarely shows in comps, but you could tell how like extremely frustrated she was by some of the problems and by her performance. And it was interesting to see her like be human and be rattled a bit and shaken by it.
And then 45 minutes later, she comes out for the lead and just like,
yeah,
I'm like locked down, like I'm back in Terminator mode, just ready to go.
Well, watching her do some of the problems, have you guys all seen the movie Gladiator?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know the scene early in the film when he fights his way through a bunch of people, he kills like a bunch of people, and then he starts screaming, "Are you not entertained?" It's like when she, so like seeing her tear through some of the problems in 10 or 15 seconds and then just walk off the stage. I just wanted to turn around and be like, "Are you not entertained?" It's like after all these other women have been struggling on a problem for so long, and she just comes out, does it, and leaves, and you're like, dude, she's literally out there for like 20 seconds of her 5-minute time, and like didn't even look like she cared and left. Yeah. You're like, that's so next level. It was insane.
It was really the boulder portion of the women's final was really kind of with Yanya. It was really the story of kind of two performances. To your point, Alex, because like. Boulder 1 was one of those problems where she came out and she flashed it in like less than 30 seconds.
Like 15 seconds. Yeah, it was insane. She literally just did it and walked away.
And so you're thinking, okay, this is the Yanya that we've seen so many times. And then on the very next boulder, which was the slab, she struggled at the start and the low section a little bit, like a few times, kind of surprisingly. Even on commentary, they were surprised. I don't know if it came across, Alex, to the audience, but it sounded like some people were kind of like rustling in their seats, like, oh, what's going on here? Yanya's struggling.
But then she still looked so much better on it than everybody else. I mean, she looked so composed on her feet, and she just stood there and was relaxed, and then she still did it. I noticed the same thing where I was like, oh, weird, she fell off the start moves a couple times. But then I was like, I don't know if she cares about that, because it's like such a small deduction in points that like you can kind of be loose with your attempts as long as you make it to the top of things. And so, I don't know, it still took her 2.5 minutes to do the problem, and she just looked dominant on it. And you're like, yeah, it's a weird problem. She figured it out and did it.
Like the camera views of her face would imply that she cared, because she was like, I don't think I've seen her that frustrated. And it definitely felt like the views they were showing of her when she was trying the start of the second problem were like she was clearly frustrated.
And then even on the final two boulders of that set. So the third one, she flashed
the power boulder.
Yep, she flashed that. And then the fourth boulder, she had all sorts of problems going from, like you said, the finger got stuck in the hold. And I think that really wrecked her rhythm. Like I know when I was just assessing the boulder kind of seeing how the other women did it in the beta that they were trying, I was thinking, okay, this boulder, I think Yanya is probably going to cruise through the low section, and it's probably going to take her 3 or 4 attempts to maybe dial in the upper, like the top, right? And then she'll get it after 3 or 4 attempts. But then it turns out she actually struggled in the low section. And so she didn't really have that much time to give several good goes at the top. And so that's when I think she looked really rattled, not only because of the finger, but also because I don't know, but I'm just guessing she probably knows that she could have done it if she had sort of had like a little more of her normal rhythm to the attempts and everything. She just looked very unsettled there. But I think taken as a whole, in a lot of ways, you look at this and you think, I think this was maybe her best performance ever, because of the big stage, because of all the implications and all the pressure. But it was her best performance because it was not her best performance, right? Like, performatively speaking, we've seen her much more kind of in sync and much more in the flow state and just like crushing through. We've seen her flash, 3 or 4 boulders in a final rather than having struggles on a slab and struggles on a start. But that just makes it all the more impressive. I kind of think there's that old saying in sports. It's something like the great competitors, they don't just find a way to win when they're playing well or performing well. They find a way to win when they're not performing well. Like, when they're not at their best, they still find a way to win. And I think that kind of epitomized Yanya.
I think that's what separates her performance from Serrato's, where you're sort of like, oh, Serato, also like didn't quite have his best day, but just wasn't quite dominant enough overall, wound up with the silver. And you're like, still great climber, but just like didn't quite have what Yanya had.
And significantly younger than Yanya, so that's what's exciting, because you look at him, not that you want to make any comparison so early because he is so young, but you got to think, okay, he's only 17, so by the time he is Yanya's age, by the time he's in his mid-20s and he has a little bit more of that wisdom and experience, what's he going to be like? Yeah,
it was interesting how many of the competitors immediately looked to LA in 28 or even the Olympics after that, wherever those are going to be. And I was like, man, it must be so crazy to be a competitor and know what your next 4 to 8 years look like. Especially if you're somebody like Serrato's age and you're like, oh, my next decade is going to be spent training and doing this. And that's great, and he's really good at it. But I'm like, wow, what an unusual. I think it's really different than most climbers' experiences. You're like, I know what I'm going to be doing for the next 8 years. I'm going to be training for Olympics. Like, that is so next level.
I was thinking about that with Andra, too, because I think all signs and signals kind of point that he probably won't be wanting to stick around the comp scene and the Olympic whirlwind for another 4 years.
No, he said if it separates out to lead, then he would maybe stick around for it.
That's what I was going to say, because he'll be on the older side in terms of the statistics of all the ages of all the competitors, and yet you look at just the isolated lead portion, and it's like he was tied for the high point here, right? He was kind of tied for what would have equated to a gold medal in the lead of this combined. So you got to think that gives him stoke to go for it in 4 years.
Isn't it interesting how as climbing gets more elite, like more athletic performance, like Olympics, that it's starting to separate out the way, track and field events do a little bit, where like the most powerful, explosive, basically the boulders are all super young, but the best route climbers are all sort of in their 30s. And I'm like, oh, this is all starting to look like running or something, where it's like marathoners are a little older, but full-on sprinters are a little younger. You're sort of like, oh, well, it seems like the old guys can keep hanging on to the wall.
Yeah. Looking forward to LA in 2028. Should we hang on to the combined format? Is this the best way to measure it, or should it be split out? I'm curious to hear everyone's thought.
No, it should be split out for sure. I think we saw that this year in Paris, how the speed climbers had their moment to shine. And I feel like when you split out the awards, the medals, then it means that lead climbers have their moment to shine. Somebody like Imori would be able to just lead climb and probably win and not have to mess with the bouldering. And, there are a lot of other competitors like that or somebody like Oriane Bertone could do just the bouldering and not have to mess with the lead climbing. It's like you'd get to see people perform more at their limit, do their whatever they're best at.
But I do think there's value to the combined.
No, I think the ideal is all 4, is that you have 3 different disciplines plus a combined, which is all 3.
Can I tell you my 5th that I would add if we get to add 5? I always say they should add the equivalent of like the high jump in track and field. So they should add like a dyno, just a dyno discipline.
I think that's dumb, but I hear what you're saying though. That would be kind of cool. We'll be back with more after the break. Element is a zero-sugar electrolyte drink mix formulated with a science-backed ratio of sodium to potassium to magnesium. Each packet delivers a meaningful dose of electrolytes free of sugar, artificial colors, or other dodgy ingredients. It tastes great, and I've used it extensively on expeditions. And my 2-year-old loves it and calls it sprinkle water. Element is formulated for anyone looking to restore health through hydration and is perfectly suited for athletes, folks who are fasting, or those who follow keto, low-carb, whole food, or paleo diets. Try Element totally risk-free. If you don't like it, they'll refund your order, no questions asked. Get your free sample pack with any Element purchase at drinkelement.com/climbinggold. Be sure to try the new Element Sparkling, a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water. That's drinklmnt.com/climbinggold.
What were people's favorite moments?
For me, we haven't even talked about it, but like, let's talk about Brooke. I mean, like, what a boss. I mean, she came out, she had a great day of climbing, she performed at her best, and she legitimately challenged Yanya. I mean, like, pushed Yanya to the very end and got a silver medal. I'm like, what a boss. I was so happy for her. I mean, we've interviewed her. And then I'd hung out with her mom and stuff before the event, and then I interviewed her twice afterward, and I was just like, oh, I'm so happy for Brooke. Mostly because it's exactly the progression that you want to see in sport, where you're like, oh, she sort of slipped in Tokyo, didn't have her best, sort of struggled, came back way mentally stronger, way more composed, way more seasoned, and then had her best day of climbing and freaking won a silver medal. You're like, what a boss.
Yeah. I agree. And just also to watch her behavior and her sportsmanship, Fitz was talking about that too. Like, she just was so
positive,
fun to watch and positive, and, yeah, it was really great.
Well, it's because she's so much less stressed. I think mentally she's in such a better place than a lot of the other competitors, and it just showed in both her performance and her demeanor.
Yeah, absolutely. She definitely, like, watching her was certainly on the top 3 of my favorites. Another favorite moment for me was watching Colin stick problem 4.
Yeah, totally. So amazing. He's so good.
And like realize, yeah, it was so cool. And that was really amazing.
Yeah, he kind of saved that boulder from being a kind of a dud, right? With being the only competitor to top it. What an awesome boulder, too. Just the finish with the 2 fingers.
And he looked so good on it. Like, that was the thing is, it wasn't even, like, he just looked dominant on that boulder compared to everybody else. Like, it looked so easy for him. Last
2 or so minutes of the women's final. I think we've kind of already mentioned it, but I just think all packaged together, that has to be thought of as just such a highlight reel moment. From the time that Yanya reaches and kind of confirms that she has won the gold medal with getting the hold, and then she climbs a little bit higher, and then she falls, she's belayed down, and then she celebrates, and Brooke running over to her to congratulate her. I think that all together is just, I was thinking it's an incredible moment because it hit on multiple levels, I think just from pure sports fandom, just watching her reach and get the gold medal. Like, that kind of nail-biting moment. Is she going to get the gold medal or not? That speaks to the sports fan. I think then when she is lowered down and she literally like falls to her knees because she's so overcome with emotion, the elation, the relief. I think that speaks to just almost like a human level, right? Like, you don't need to be you don't need to know anything that's going on in that situation, but you see the emotion wash over her, and you can't help but be moved by that. But then when Brooke runs over to give her the hug, the first person to congratulate her in person is Brooke, the person that she's just beat, right? For the person that Yanya has just beat out of the gold medal, is the first person to congratulate her. To me, I'm like, that speaks to the climbers, because it's all about sharing the stoke, right? Like, that's kind of like why we do the podcast and why people listen to this podcast, because we know that the communal part of climbing is what makes it just the best. And I think that was kind of embodied by Brooke running over to congratulate her. So I don't know. I have goosebumps right now talking about it, because those last 2 minutes were it's like there was something for everybody.
Yeah, in the venue, I sort of teared up when I was like, oh, they're all crying on stage. They're all holding each other. And I was like, this is so emotional. It was like so powerful.
Wait, did you tear up?
Well, I didn't cry, but I was sort of like, I felt like slightly misty, you know. I was sort of like, I think I feel something, and I feel something like powerful, you know. Yeah. I was like,
One day we're gonna get Alex to cry on the podcast.
it would take a lot, but I was like, I was like, this. It definitely felt really powerful in person. I was like, I really liked seeing the examples of good sportsmanship, and there were a lot of them throughout the 6 days. But I mean, particularly with the French climbers, because a lot of the French climbers, I feel like, were kind of long shots. You know, like Paul climbing in. You know, it's like, I've never heard of him. Like, he's not like winning World Cups or anything, but he's out there like giving his best shot, trying his very best. And the crowd was like, going insane for anybody from France, in a way that I almost felt bad for the competitors, because it's like the crowd is, wants them to win so badly, but obviously they're not going to win. Like, you're kind of like, this isn't going to be the first time in their lives that they suddenly like wildly outperform everyone they've been competing against for the last couple of years. It's like, it's just totally unrealistic. And yet, I don't know. And so you could kind of see that a lot of the competitors were stressed, by the expectations, the people yelling at them or whatever. And yet, and a lot of them were clearly disappointed. They'd come off some of the boulders and be like, this is upsetting that I couldn't do this. But when they still sort of managed to wave to the crowd, acknowledge everybody, take a bow, whatever, like, I don't know, it was just nice to see when people could step outside of their own emotional experience and be like, this is an incredible place that I am. I appreciate the crowd. Thank you guys. What a day, and walk off.
Yeah. I mean, there's got to be something special about competing at that high of a level and having worked, like, that camaraderie of having worked so hard for something for so long. And like, no one can really understand that but your like fellow competitor, So I imagine it's like a special moment for them.
Do we think that in terms of how it showed, how it played out, do we feel like climbing won? As a whole, did our sport put the best foot forward that it could have possibly, and was it received in a way that, kind of like forwarded it?
I think so. I mean, I can't speak to the broadcast because I was live, but no, the live experience was incredible. The venue was incredible. The people were psyched. The fans were insane. It was, and also there was a lot of, like, the King of Spain came one of the days to see Alberto do the lead route, and like the head of the IOC, who apparently is a really big deal, the Olympic Committee, like, he came to watch a couple things. And like, basically every major federation would have dignitaries like from their country, from their federations. Like, a lot of people came to sort of drop in on climbing and like see what the buzz is all about. Because I was kind of over in the zone where those people all come. And so each day you'd be like, oh, here's like some important person coming to see what the hype is all about. And I was like, it definitely felt like climbing was cool, and also because, like I said, the climbing venue was not on the way to anything. It's like people coming to check out climbing were like going out of their way to come check out climbing. It wasn't like, oh, I just drop in while I'm walking between these two other stadiums. It's like, no, the climbing venue was like way out of town. So you really had to make an effort to come see it.
Yeah. King of Spain, but maybe more importantly was Snoop. Did Snoop make an appearance at the climbing venue?
I don't think Snoop made it.
Dang it.
That's right. LA 28, Dude, I think Snoop is probably the most in-demand person at the whole Olympics, though.
Yeah, he was everywhere. Yeah. We just witnessed something awesome in our sport. At least I feel that way. What do you get excited about looking forward, thinking about the next few years, indoors, outdoors? What did this do in terms of like looking towards the future and making you excited for climbing?
I don't know if this necessarily represents anything new for me for the future. I just think this is another step in this journey of growth that climbing is experiencing. We're sort of like, oh, this is definitely the next step in sort of professionalism and athleticism. And it does get me psyched for LA 28 because I'm like, oh, I feel like climbing has really grown up and becoming a more mainstream sport in a way that's actually kind of fun to see. And then for the outdoor world, I actually am a little bit excited about some of the competitors, people like Adam or Yakob Schuber, maybe devoting a little more time to outdoor climbing, perhaps, if they feel a little bit liberated from competition training. Because, I mean, Adam could definitely be putting up the world's third 9C or, like basically the hardest routes in the world, or like focusing on trying to establish the next grade or whatever else. It's like really some of these climbers are capable of anything that they set their minds to. And so now even the ones who will compete again in 4 years probably feel like they have a 2-year buffer now to do a little bit more outdoor climbing and, maybe play on some big walls or like play on, whatever, like do things that are different and fun for them. So, I mean, it'll be fun to see this level of talent unleashed upon the climbing world for a little while.
Yeah. I think the thing that also made me excited was just how young the field is. There were the veterans there. There was Yanya and Andra and Jacob and Tomoa even, but the youth that's coming out is just, it's really exciting, I feel like, too, when you think about that. John, I think at some point you pointed out that Toby Roberts had a 7-year plan to get here that he enacted. And you're like, what if they enact, like when you start seeing people put their minds to things and that youth and how strong some of those young competitors really look, like how strong Colin can look, like how strong Brooke can look. Like it's exciting to think that these people are, just under 20 or just over 20, and they've got 15 years ahead of them to really dazzle us. And, like as fans, as connoisseurs of climbing, indoors and outdoors, there's just a lot's going to happen, I feel like, in the next 10 years.
Yeah, think about if for the young competitors, if they're 16, or like Serato, if they're 17 years old, LA 2028, they're still going to be like 20, 21. They're still going to be young, like 4 years from now. It's so there's such a long runway for their careers and how they can crush on the circuit.
Yeah, like Brooke could legitimately go to 2 more Olympics. Like each of those guys could go to 2 more,
Yeah.
but you're sort of like
Colin, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Brooke and Colin, like 4-time Olympians potentially.
Yeah. We brought up the boulder problem that Colin Duffy topped out with the crazy sideways coordination dyno to like a bowling ball, tiny hole that was so precise.
Snake eyes. Yeah, the snake eyes, the double mono.
And you're like, I also think that 4 years from now, I think we could see some like crazy progressions in some of the movement. You think about parkour if like, it's kind of a new thing inside. I mean, it's not that new, but it's been an evolving thing inside of the comp world. And you're like, I could see a space where at the next Olympics in the bouldering, there could be moves where somebody's like having to throw a 360 in the air to stop, to get the next hold. Like that's not out of the question where you're like, oh, the actual movement could be changing and evolving like within the next 4 years.
And like John Glassberg, who's like filming with Yanya, said that at some World Cup, a year or two ago, she fell on some step up move on a slab, like some tricky little like whoop whoop, and said that afterward her coach made her only do step up moves for 2 months, and she basically has never fallen off that move again. And you're just kind of like, well, this is how you master elements of movement, is you just drill them nonstop. And I think that's what we're seeing in competition now, is like people are just learning the most interesting moves. Anyway, I say all this just because it feels like a real departure from what I've experienced as an outdoor climber, where you just kind of like see what nature gives you, and the holds and the movements are all like relatively regular, and you just like climb the way you always climb. And it seems like the nature of competition climbing is that it has to be totally different all the time.
It's almost like I feel like, you go to a certain area, like or Yosemite or limestone in Europe, right? And it's got a vocabulary to it, like a movement vocabulary. And you go through that. And I think what I hear you saying is that inside of comp climbing, this is a chance where we actually or like the elite people are like writing the language. Like they're actually making the new words. They're actually doing that. Like when you think about that in terms of movement, is that kind of what you're thinking?
Well, yeah, the competition climbing has like a 15-volume series on movement, and then you look at Yosemite, and it's like this slim little picture book, that has like a couple things, like you lie back and you hand jam, and that's about it. You're kind of like, okay. And it's like, I think that we're seeing more and more that competition climbing is what drives innovation and movement.
Any final thoughts?
No, I'm going to go climbing. I'm going to apply some of this Olympic stoke and just probably fall off the first bolt of my projects. I'm so jet lagged and worked, but I feel like I got to at least try.
We didn't really talk too much about women's speed, but Miroslav is a beast. She got it down to 6 flat, or like 6.06, the world record. Sheesh, just that was so incredible.
I was sad for Emma that she didn't get to have her best, but that's the sort of unforgiving nature of speed.
I just had a blast. I thought it was so fun to watch, and I'm super injured right now, so it was even more fun to like be with a huge community of friends and like talk about my sport.
Oh, lucky dogs. Yeah, I missed the viewing party because I was too busy viewing.
You missed the viewing party, but we all, made jokes about you on screen.
That's good. You just make fun of me. Yeah, that's perfect. That's what I'm there for.
Yeah. I just really I will never, I realized, I was like, this is cool. I will never forget actually watching the women's finals with my whole family there, and just seeing my kids and my youngest 8-year-old. Every time he'd be like, let's go. And it was in not the like let's go for the competitor, but it was like let's go in the communal sense of just being like he was there and he got done and he was like really tired. He'd been like at a camp the whole week. He's exhausted and he was like, "Can we go climbing?" Like that's what happened. As it turned around and this like 8-year-old kid watched that, and then he goes to the climbing gym, and you can see him take the things he was seeing in that comp and trying to like recreate them. Like he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna only use my one finger. I'm gonna do this whole problem just as a mono problem," and he would only put like one finger on it. And then he was like doing all these like no-handed step ups, and that moment of seeing actually a kid like witness something, watch something, and then immediately want to go apply it was like, this is the magic of sport, and that was rad. Thanks everyone for following along as we covered Paris 2024. It's been an incredible journey. Climbing Gold is a production of Duct Tape and Beer. Alex Honnold is our host. Our production and editing team includes the talents of Lauren Delaney Miller, Marco Seiler Gonzalez, and Evan Phillips. Skylar Perwins is our YouTube and social media editor. Music today by Brendan O'Connell. Tracks are courtesy of the artists or Track Club. Our creative director is me, Fitz Cahal, and our executive producers are Jonathan Redsick and Ben Endy for RXR Sports, and Lisi Hendricks and Becca Cahal for Duct Tape and Beer. Thanks for listening.